that it's being recorded, or it's just mine?
Yeah, I know it's showing it's recording.
Okay, good. You got your coffee? Are you a morning person? Are you an after?
I am not a morning person. That's why I do live sound.
Wake up at the crack of noon.
Yeah.
Hit the Bloody Mary bar.
So the last few years, I've it's you get into sound because you're a night owl, and I'm having to get up earlier and earlier and earlier. I'm like, what's going on with that?
You got to check out of hotels, and people have got to load in the gear. And yeah, when I saw Bruce Springsteen do the keynote at South by one year, which by the way I was taking notes. The man it was unbelievable. I think that was the lunchtime keynote, and he's like, "Why are we all up so early?"
Yeah. Well, especially musicians, they don't have to work before 2 or 3 in the afternoon.
He said, anyone who did anything of importance is still in bed. That's right. It was awesome. I was happy to be in the audience, and it was packed, and we were all, man's a storyteller, that's for sure.
Oh yeah.
It was amazing.
Have you seen his Broadway show, or did you ever see his Broadway show?
I have not. I'm hoping it's still on Netflix, because some point I'll have some time here.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're gonna have a lot of time.
So my kids are now end of May, I think is now, which means or May 1st, I think they're saying. No, yeah, May 1st. But it'll be the end of the year. It'll be all online.
Right. Well, I just heard that California and Virginia were told to expect this self-distancing and somewhat quarantine to last until mid-June.
Yeah.
Which is yeah.
It's another world. So yeah, I mean, people are on, so we're a little early, but early bird gets the worm. Anyone with just a few people on? Does anyone ask Michelle a question real quick while we got her before anyone else chimes in?
Morning, everybody.
I'll keep the chat window open, so if you want to ask a question or something, you can raise your hand. So yeah, we can just, I mean, we're here. We'll just start chatting if it's all right. So
sure.
Just want to make sure it worked out. So, so your tour, and we'll probably have to circle back this around, but what are you doing to keep busy right now since the road is not an option?
Well, I have the online course, so I just started creating a second course on EQing and ear training. So I've been doing that, and aside from that, just doing all the maintenance around the house that always gets put off. Like purging my closets and small repairs, getting ready to do some good yard work and clean up of all the mess from the fall once the weather breaks here.
Yeah. My daughter's like, this is all the stuff I do right after school, like organize the closet and move the window. Yeah, but timing's all weird. Yeah. So is there any kind of chatter for August or September, or is it a little bit of chatter, or everyone's like, we don't know, but maybe? And
yeah, well, I think everyone, the tour that I was supposed to do this summer, we were supposed to start rehearsals May 1st with the first show May 15th. So
this is the Elvis Costello?
No, this is Blink 182. So about a week ago, they were talking about pushing rehearsals to mid to late May, first show somewhere mid-June. But now with hearing that California is probably going to still be on somewhat of a lockdown until mid-June, it's changing by the day. It's just kind of going to be, everyone is just sitting and waiting to hear when we can go back. And, so then, and as soon as that happens, it's going to be kind of a free for all, because everybody needs the money and needs the work. So.
And will fans have money to go to shows?
That's the other question is that, I think tours that have already been scheduled, shows that have already been scheduled and on sale, people have the tickets for. Obviously, most of those bands will probably try and just reroute around those dates that they can do, because that's the easiest way to do it. And then whatever does go on sale, it's going to be tough because people are going to have a very limited amount of money at that point after being out of work for how many months.
I mean, yeah, a lot of my students, are not only trying to deal with online school, a lot of them all got laid off from, jobs, whether, I have one student, her pizza place is open, but everyone else had,
Yeah.
either part-time roadie gigs or, whatever. They all shut down, everything. So there's not a lot of money circulating around.
Yeah, I think the rumor is like next year will be the big year for touring, because everyone will be, hopefully things will be back to normal and people will be okay. Now we got to go out and make some money. So.
Yeah, that seems, we're going to have Olympics, it's going to be going on. You're going to have, a lot of the big tours just, automatically just like, we'll do it 2021,
Right.
Because I think it'd be a lot to try to like, maybe August, maybe September, there's a lot of iffy stuff and trying to, it doesn't seem helpful.
No, yeah. It's kind of everyone's sitting and waiting,
So if the Blink 180 tour was going to happen, so you'd have a couple, like a week of rehearsals somewhere?
Yeah, I think it was about 2 weeks of rehearsals were planned. And then, they would start basically whatever however short of a period that they feel they can get away with rehearsing at this point. And then they would probably, if the government says, okay, as of June 20th, you can go back to having large groups of people gather together, they'd probably back up from there, to do rehearsals and then start with their first date wherever it was going to be on June 20th or as possible.
When we took students to Nashville, we went to, I cannot remember the place at the top, but one of the rehearsals places in Nashville that was pretty cool. That one of the ones that got, when they had the flood in Nashville, they got everything destroyed. So do you have a particular place that you like to work at, or does it not matter?
It's not really up to me, but there are some nice places in LA. There's Center Staging, there's Mates. It depends on the needs, like for band rehearsals, some smaller places are set up just for that. Then if you want to do production rehearsals, you need bigger places. You usually do that in a venue, if you're at UPA and stuff like that.
So when do you start? So hello, everybody who's joining as it clicks the 11 o'clock. So I'll do I think you've all got an email and you know why you're here, but Michelle Pettinato is 30, 25 years. I don't know how many years are you?
Almost 30 years on the road, yeah.
Yeah, right. So starting as a wee lass, being pulled in with the Spin Doctors, about to, jump the stratosphere from bar band to, opening for the Rolling Stones, within a matter of, it seems like months when you tell that story. And then recently just got with Elvis Costello until everything was shut down just this year. So do you want to talk about the speed at which that happened, when you were with Elvis just recently? This was just a couple weeks ago, right?
Yeah, we left for we had a UK tour scheduled. We left for the UK on February 23rd. And within about a week, things started to escalate over there where, our keyboard player, he lives in Paris, France, and he was starting to hear that his wife might not be able to come because she was going to come to the London show. And France was starting to talk about, closing the borders, and Italy was starting to talk about, shutting down. And, here when we left, it was just kind of, there's this virus, whatever. There wasn't really a lot of talk in the news, but when we got over there, it was just kind of, it was really starting to hit Europe really severely. And about 2 weeks into the tour, it started to look like, okay, well, Italy basically had put everyone in quarantine, and other countries were starting to close airports. And then I think I think Neil Young might have been one of the first American artists that said he was canceling his tour. And then shortly after that, a couple other artists postponed their tours. And we were still fine in the UK. Like, we were kind of outrunning it. Like, it still hadn't quite hit the UK like it had hit Europe.
Right.
And, but, daily things were changing. So we just kept going, and we got about, I think it was about the beginning of second week of May. And we just finished our 2 shows in Scotland. And about 2 days later, Scotland banned anything over 500 people. So we just made it through there.
Second week of March.
Yeah. And it just was kind of like, at one point they brought us all together, and management had someone looking into things, like hired a specialist to see, is it safe for the artists, us to still be out there? They were just kind of keeping an eye on things, and everyone was fine. Everybody was healthy. Attendance was still, good. so it was just kind of a day by day, let's go and see how far we can get. But then we did our London show, which was we had 3 shows after that. And the next day was when the president announced he was going to stop all flights from the UK. So the next day,
Britain, like, hey, that's us.
Right. And then the next day, UK announced that they were going to start, they were considering banning large gatherings. So at that point, it made sense. We were in London and we were all, scheduled to fly home from London anyway, about a week later. So they just, they decided to cancel or postpone the last 3 shows to make them up later and get us all home while they still could. But when we were over there, like it was, daily, reports of what was going on in the world. And it was crazy, just how fast it escalated.
So then all your trucks are packed up. So
yeah,
you got.
So we had 3 trucks, and we had sound, lights, and video, and the back line that all of our band gear came from the US. So when we loaded out for London, all of our trucks were kind of, the gear was spread out between, it's mostly sound and backline in one truck, lights and video in 2 other trucks, but then all of the rigging for the sound motors goes with the lighting truck. So there was some repacking that had to go on to get everything back to where it needs to go. So what happened was our production manager and one of the band techs stayed to go and redo the trucks the next day while everybody else flew home.
Yeah.
They got everything sorted out.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So I'll kind of dart around if it's all right as far as just questions. I got so many. Let's get technical for a second. What sort of things are your must-have? Do you get a wish list, or do you have personal gear that you bring, or is there a combination of like, these are the things I have to have that you've?
Yeah, I'm kind of a less is more person. I have my preference on console, and that's kind of like the big thing for me is depending on the tour, like I've been using the Midas Pro X I've been using Midas for decades now.
Yeah.
That's my preferred console just because I think it sounds great, and I prefer to have start with the right tool for the job, rather than have a lesser quality console that I have to add thousands of dollars worth of plugins to make sound better.
Yeah.
I'd rather start with the best sounding console. So I prefer the Midas. And then I also like the Digico, depending on the act that I'm mixing. The Digico SD7 has a lot of great features for an act with a large channel count, because you have 48 faders on the surface. So you have a lot more in front of you, which is why I like analog, because analog, everything's in front of you, all the time.
Yeah.
You're sorting through, layers and pages. So, it's more a matter of what does the job require? Like what is my, what are my needs for that show? And after that, like I prefer to do all of my system EQ through the Dolby Lake system. So I always have Lake processors in my rack and the tablet, so I can do all my system EQ through that.
Okay.
And then, it just depends on the artist, what my needs are for that show.
Do some artists come with endorsements where you have to use their mic packages? Is that pretty common?
Yeah, I've had a couple drummers that I worked with that had endorsements with different mic companies. A lot of vocalists will have an endorsement for a vocal mic, different things like that. Yeah.
That's a lot of press of all the pictures of them singing in front with that microphone.
Yeah, and sometimes it's a big compromise, because what works, like they got this deal because the microphone company approached them and he was like, oh, we'll give you all this publicity, blah, blah, blah. We'll give you all these mics for free, or this great deal. And they may not be the best mics. Like I've had one case where one of the drummers I worked with, I hated the microphones.
Uh-oh.
And they were like my least favorite microphones to use. And, when I first took over the job, we talked about it, but he had a big time endorsement with this company for years. I'm like, all right, well, that's, I get that. So I will compromise because, this was in place long before I got here. Another case, I had a singer who, the vocal mic that they had been using for a couple of years, it wasn't an endorsement, but they just, it didn't work for their voice. And when we were in rehearsals, I just could not get it to sound the way I wanted it to sound. So we tried a good 6 or 8 other microphones on the singer, and they could not get what they needed to hear in their in-ears to get their pitch right. And, you know, they just couldn't get it to sound like the microphone that I thought sounded the best. They couldn't get what they needed to hear in their head. So it became a compromise of, okay, well, they had, it was a whole new kind of show for them. So they had a lot of choreography and a lot of, there was a lot of video that was completely, you know, synced to time code. So the show had to be exact. So there was a lot going on in the singer's head every day that they had to think about. And the last thing that they had to worry about was their voice. So I decided to let them use the microphone that they were comfortable with because they were going to give me a better performance.
Yeah, right.
And then I could just, you know, I added a couple pieces of outboard gear, you know, like preamps and things to make it give me more of what I was looking for rather than force them onto a brand new mic that they were going to be struggling with while they're trying to, you know, get everything else happening. So. Because
I think one of the trickiest things I would think for you is not someone who's not done anywhere near the level. I mean, nowhere near the level. But, you know, the joys of working in the studio is that I get to sit down in the same space, in the same set of speakers, listen at a reasonable volume. Like, you're in like even if the speaker and the microphone's the same, like the venues are totally different. Like, how do you even like... how do you even know what sounds good? Like, what is your, that's my question. How do you even
it's easy to know what sounds bad. Basically, what I do is I have a routine. I have a series of like a handful of songs that I use. So once we load in and set up in the venue, once the PA is up, my system tech will noise everything and set all the delay times, make sure it's all working properly. And then I throw in a couple different tracks and play them through the PA as I walk around the room. So it's the first track I play is an instrumental track, and it's got a good blend of mids, lows, highs, and subs. And I put that on, and I just walk around the room, and I kind of acclimate to because I know all these songs are songs that I've been using for years that I know what they should sound like. So my first thing is to listen to the room, you know, like, okay, what frequencies in this room are jumping out, you know, that are unpleasant, and does the PA sound even across the entire audience area? Like, is there places where, especially in theaters, you get to the back under the balcony and you'll be, you know, you lose all the high end, or the low end would build up, or, you know, you have little pockets of things that sound really different. So it's a little bit of acclimation. And then after that, once I kind of have a feel for what's happening, I'll put on a couple other tracks where I start to EQ the system for the room and also for the speakers. If it's, you know, if there's certain things in the speakers that I don't like. But the key is using, you know, songs that I'm really familiar with that I know what they should sound like. So whatever I play them on, I know what I'm looking for, how I want that to sound. And that's what I aim for.
Is one of the tracks a Steely Dan track? It always seems like it is.
No, I've managed to never use, I mean, Steely Dan sounds amazing, but it's so, you know, so many sound engineers use that.
That's that's the quintessential, you know, PA song. There's always a Steely Dan song. So, so I'm going to rewind back a couple things. So something like on a Blink tour, talk about some of all the different, particularly related to audio jobs. What are all the different jobs that are going on, right? So the truck driver has a truck of audio gear. So that's one job, and the truck driver backs up. Now walk us through all the different jobs that might happen on this Blink tour.
Yeah. So, well, as far as the audio department goes, there's you have the system tech, and their job is, they're kind of like the audio crew chief. Their job is to put the PA up every day. Make sure, like, they'll come in and it's called shooting the room. So they'll, you know, take the measurements of, you know, where the furthest seat is, how high up the furthest seat is, and then enter all that stuff into the computer, which will then tell them, here's how you're going to fly the PA, you know, what angles you need and how high it needs to be. A lot of that stuff, you know, with modern technology, the computer just gives you all the information. You know, you just need to know how to use the software and the system.
Is that smart, or is that something else?
It's something else. It's usually proprietary for each different PA.
Oh, okay.
But like, you know, 10 years ago, we didn't really have this. You know, it was just, they were just starting to build some of these systems. So you kind of had to come in and, you know, you'd have system techs that had played the venues hundreds of times, so they knew, okay, well, this is how I put the PA up in this venue. But their job is to get the system up, make sure everything's working, get everything up and ready for me. Then depending on how much PA we're carrying, like if you're doing an arena tour where you have the main hang and then side hangs because you're selling seats around the side of the stage, you'll usually have an A2, which helps to fly the PA with the system engineer. So you'll have the system engineer will fly one side and then the A2 will fly another side. And there may even be a third person that helps to fly the PA if you have a lot of it. On a smaller tour, the A2's job is usually to wire and mic the stage. Like they'll run all the stage cable from power for the backline, power for audio. If you have monitors on stage, they'll run all the cables for that. They'll mic the stage. They'll run all the mic cables, patch the snake. And then sometimes you'll have, then you have the front of house and monitor engineer. So I do front of house and I'm a working front of house engineer. So I like to set my world up. I like to check all of my own stuff. Sometimes the system engineer will do that. You know, if the front of house engineer doesn't, then the system engineer usually takes care of that. The monitor engineer, they usually do the same thing, or else they can have an assistant that comes in and sets up all of their monitor world. And then the monitor engineer, they mix the sound for the band on stage. And that's usually like the core. Like when you start doing stadium tours, like, you know, a Rolling Stones huge stadium tour, there could be a whole other group of people that their job is just to set up all the delay towers, you know, because you've got to set up speaker delays throughout the stadium to cover everything. So you'll have a crew of guys who just set all that, and that's their only job for the day. Yeah.
At what point do delay tower, I mean, there's outdoor sheds like that have delay towers for, you know, like where you have seats and then the grass.
The sheds usually, they all have an installed rig to cover the lawn. So that basically, when we go into a shed, we will tie into their delay system. Yeah.
So then, so that's the, is that a touring with the system tech, the front of house monitor engineer, A2, they're going to be traveling with the act, right?
Yeah, depending on the tour, you know, like you could do like a large scale tour if you're carrying a sound system. Like with the Blink tour, we were not going to be carrying PA, but we were going to still carry a system tech to just make sure that everywhere we go, they'll take care of making sure the system is right for me and what I need.
So what does that mean to not carry PA?
So we'll use local PA everywhere we go. And some of the venues will have, because with Blink, they were going to be doing everything from festivals to sheds to arenas and theaters. So some of the venues actually do have a PA already in-house. And then others, basically, I will do a spec of what I prefer to use, and then they'll send that out to the promoter. And then the promoter will hire a local vendor to supply what we need.
Okay. Yeah. So they're not going. So will they carry video and lights?
I think, I'm not sure what they're carrying on that end.
Yeah.
Like we're actually carrying consoles. So we have everything that we need audio wise except for the speakers. So we'll have a front of house and monitor console, all of our stage cable and in-ear systems and microphones.
Has every tour gone to in-ears, or is anyone still using?
Oh yeah, there's still people using wedges and monitors. Yeah.
How are you not deaf at this point?
I don't know.
I mean, that's a lot of exposure to loud sounds, right?
Yeah.
Do you mix with earplugs at all?
I have on occasion. One tour, I mixed this boy band called Big Time Rush around 2012, and the audience was literally like 15,000 screaming little girls from the ages of 6 to 26, and they just screamed for 4 hours long every night. And, you know, the minute the show started till the end. So the volume of that was louder than the PA. You know, like we would meter it, and there was days where their screaming was at 118 dB. You know, and like 120 dB is like the sound of a jet engine. Like that's how loud that is. So in a situation like that, those girls don't really care what it sounds like. They just want to see their favorite boy on stage. So, you know, I'm not trying to make the PA louder than that, because if I do, I'm going to hurt people. So you just get it to a point where you can kind of hear it. Like you can hear it, and if they stop screaming, they can hear it. But there was nights where they were, you know, they were just surrounding me. I was so close to all of them that I'd get the mix going, and I'd put some earplugs in and just kind of check it every now and then. But It's just not worth the hearing damage, you know, for
Right.
for that. So
That's wow. There was a mall in downtown Columbus, and the Hanson did a mall appearance,
Right.
and it was all concrete and glass and three open. I mean, it was just it was so loud. So yeah. Okay. So that's kind of definitely not anything you could have expected. What are some of the other things that you've had to deal with that are sort of unexpected? Of like, I mean, that's the whole point of live sound, is like you're setting this up from scratch almost every single day, right? So, right. I mean, from one cable not being plugged all the way in to power being cut out to, you know, talk about some of your hardships.
well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of, you just have to be prepared for anything, you know, from working for artists who have surprise guests that just show up in the middle of a set and you're like, you had no warning. So, you know, it's kind of being on your toes of paying attention to what's happening. Where when I worked for Indigo Girls, the first couple weeks of the tour, everywhere we go, you know, it'd be like the third or fourth song of the set. And they're like, oh, we've got a friend here who's going to come out and play the violin on this song. And they had never told me or the all of a sudden, you know, the monitor engineer scrambling with a mic and a DI running out on stage to patch in this violin player who just showed up. So after that happened, like the fourth or fifth time, we started to build into the set. We would put a guest vocal and a guest DI on either side of the stage, so that whoever showed up, we already had those lines ready to go, and we had checked them so that we knew that they were there, and it was just a matter of quick, you know, dialing it up. But we weren't having to spend that extra couple minutes of running a mic and a cable and patching it in. And
sure.
So you just learn how to be prepared. And then on the other side of that, where a couple years ago, I was mixing the band Styx, and we were just doing a little show somewhere in, I think in either Nevada or California. And it was about a 250 capacity auditorium. It looked like a little chapel. It was kind of like the shape of like a little church chapel. And it was about the fourth song of the set, and power went out. And what happened was there was a big storm outside that took out the transformer for the whole community.
Right.
So because it was such a small venue, the tour manager basically at one point, you know, when the power went out and it didn't come back on right away, he took the band off the stage and he made an announcement to everyone, just yelling from the front of the stage that just, you know, remain calm, we're going to see what's going on. So a couple minutes later, the stagehands had carried up from the basement a upright piano. They wheeled it out on stage, put it on the front edge of the stage. The band walked out with acoustic guitars, a couple tambourines and shakers, and started performing completely acoustically in the dark with nothing more than like a little chandelier that was the emergency lighting for the building.
Right.
And the audience were holding up their cell phone flashlights. But because the venue was so small, they could actually do it, you know, and everyone, you know, was quiet enough that you could hear them. And it was amazing. It was like, you know, here's an audience that's never, you know, no one else is going to get that show. You know, they played a good 7 songs like that. And at that point, we had to empty the venue because they were going to run out of emergency power. It would have been pitch black, so they had to get the audience out. But right. They just kept playing. Like, you know, they were having a great time. The audience was loving it. And, you know, and that stuff like that, okay, you just sit back and watch because there's nothing you can do.
Nothing you can do. So. We had a situation at the studio when I owned the studio and the power went out. And we had a cassette 4-track, and we happened to have batteries for it, the Tascams that can run on like D batteries. So they wrote a song called Workbook Light and Power that actually made the record, like while we're, you know, trying to be productive. So yeah, some pretty magical stuff can happen.
Yeah.
Molly's got a question. I'm going to unmute you, Molly.
Hi. So I was just wondering how the industry has improved for women over your years of experience. I'm an engineer around Columbus, and I have experienced some things. So what can we do to continue improvements? And then how does that factor into being a tour engineer and that whole element of things?
Yeah, like when I started out in live sound, I didn't know any other women, and I've done many tours where I still do, like where I'll be the only woman on the road on the tour. I've also done tours where there was only one guy. So there's definitely a lot more women in the business these days, and the only time I ever ran into issues was always on the smaller level. It was, you know, and it was like when I first started out, it was oddly enough, it wasn't the guys that I worked with, it was the bouncers at the clubs where I was doing sound. I would go in the afternoon with one other guy, we'd set up the system, we'd sound check the band, we'd leave to go have dinner and come back to do the show. And the bouncers would try and charge me a cover charge thinking I was the guy's girlfriend. You know, he wouldn't believe that I was actually working, you know? So it was always from like the bottom level of people that would give me a hard time. You know, I've always, for years, you know, I always felt like I had to prove myself, like work harder, smarter, and faster. And, you know, you get a lot of people looking at you kind of like, really, you're the sound engineer? But, you know, people, just because they haven't seen women doing it before, but, you know, to be, you know, met with surprise is not a bad thing. And some people can tend to take things, like I've always felt like if you're looking for something, you're going to find it. So if you're looking for people to be judging you or giving you a hard time, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, which sometimes holds us back. But on the other side of that is, I've noticed lately in the last few years, there's been a lot more backlash towards women. And I don't know if it's that there's more women in the industry now, or if it's just a sign of the times, but there has been a lot more stuff that I've never had to deal with in my career. And it's really kind of disturbing. So I think the only thing we can do is just really support each other. You know, it's tough for women trying to break into the industry because you have this attitude of people who are always like, well, why does she want to do this? Why, you know, should we hire a woman? So I think the more women in positions of power that can hire other women will always benefit. And the support of men who are open to supporting women in the industry, you know, just having those people who have your back, who will recommend you, who will offer you those opportunities. That's the best thing we can do, is just build that network of people who do support us and help us out.
Great. With working with acts, you know, because I mean, there's Blink-182 is not a new, but that's a pretty wide range of acts. Do you find anything generationally between like working with Styx and Mr. Big, people who've been in the industry for a long time, like, you know, interacting with women versus maybe, you know, I mean, you've done the Gwen Stefani tour and Indigo Girls, and that, is there any distinction between, or is it just like people are people and everyone treats it differently, or is there any kind of
I think mostly it's been pretty individual. I mean, I've never had any issues from anyone that I've worked with. There's bands where I got hired that I thought, okay, these guys are going to give me a hard time because I'm a woman, and it was completely the opposite. You know, they were like, look, you've been so successful and you've made it this far, you must be good. So we figured we'd hire you. You know, it's like the opposite of what I was expecting. But it's very individual. You know, you just never know. I have guys, you know, peers that have dealt with discrimination. One guy I worked with, a monitor engineer, big kind of burly looking, biker looking dude with, you know, buzz cut and tattoos, but the sweetest guy you could meet. And he told me stories about a band that he worked for who, from the day one, for the first 2 weeks, they just gave him a hard time. Like, he couldn't make them happy. They were constantly giving him a hard time. And finally they came to him and said, you know, when we first saw you, we thought you were like this big tough dude, and you know, we figured you were just going to have this massive ego. And like, they basically judged a book by its cover, and were, you know, put their egos up against him in defense. And when they realized that he was just there to do his job and make them happy, they completely changed their attitude. But they were testing him. They were like, oh, who's this guy? Look at him. He thinks he's so tough. So it's not just, you know, it's not just singled out to women. It's guys. I've worked with guys who are very young, who started in the industry, who, you know, when they were in high school, and they happen to be really smart and really good, you know, and they're in their early 20s, and they're, you know, their experience and their knowledge is far beyond guys that are 10 years older than them, and they get looked down because you're 20. What do you know? Sure. But they've done a lot, and they're very good at what they do, and they meet with, you know, discrimination because they're young. So it's kind of, it's everywhere. It's just, you know, it's all depending on the situation. Yeah.
I got a question from Josie. I'm going to unmute you. Go ahead.
Hi. I was wondering if there are any specific skills or certifications that I or we could work on getting right now that would kind of make us stand out in the industry?
That's a great question. This is a great opportunity for people to learn everything you can, like things like Dante, like Smart, different platforms of the different digital consoles. Like I know Digico's got a great online tutorial on YouTube. I think if you just look up Digico tutorial, there's a great series of videos that kind of walk you through it. Dante certification is great because a lot of stuff is using Dante. What else? And Smart, I think, is actually doing some online live YouTube things right now as well. What else? Let me think. Just whatever knowledge you can amass in knowing the different consoles, because there are so many. And digital's the tough thing because every platform has its own way of doing things. So even, you know, I can't walk up to an SXL and know how to get around the menus because I haven't even used one yet. Like I can mix on it, but to know the menus inside and out, you know, we all have our preferred consoles that we use the most. So it's a matter of just like kind of going through a tutorial or a manual to figure out the nuts and bolts of things. But yeah, take advantage of this time while you have it. And Dante and Smart are two that I would definitely recommend, as well as learning different digital platforms.
So then let's talk I mean, there's no one way to navigate through this, right? So is it starting out at a club level, starting out at your local scene and working, you know, front of house for dive bars and then working up? Is that the way, or are there a couple different ways? That's
one way. I mean, when I started out, you know, I'd graduated from Wholesale and I started working at a little local sound company, mixing bands in bars. And then from there, I worked as a stagehand. I moved around, like I just moved around wherever I could get work in audio. It was just whatever I can do that has something to do with live sound. And at one point I was living in Florida working at a couple nightclubs, and I was the C engineer. So there was the A engineer and the B engineer, and whenever they weren't available, I would mix. But the other nights I would run lights. And then I worked at an entertainment complex where I worked in the AV department, fixing cables, you know, fixing systems that weren't working, and then mixing a little bit here and there. At the same time working at a little sound company and as a stagehand. Like I just took every job I could in audio until I was offered my first tour, which came from a friend who, you know, I had met in school. And that's the thing is the big thing is building your contacts in your network, because you never know where your opportunities are going to come from. So all of you guys who are classmates right now, you know, just build that network and keep in touch with each other, because 3 years down the road, you have no idea what, you know, your friends are going to be doing and who's going to call you up and say, hey, I need you for this job.
Yeah.
But the big thing is to just get a job. Like if you want to go in the studio or in live, you know, find something, any job in audio. It's not going to be your dream job right away, but just get one and get all the experience you can from that job. And then the next opportunity will present itself, but you need to be around it. Like I've known people who wanted to go on tour doing live sound, and they thought, well, I'll get a job as a production assistant or wardrobe or catering, because then I'll at least get on the road. But that's not the way, because you just do not, on tour, you don't have time to learn another job. Like if you want to go on tour doing sound, you need to either, you know, work for a sound company or get a band to hire you. Same thing with lighting. Like you're not going to go out there doing merch and then just have, you know, someone teach you sound in their free time, because it just doesn't happen like that. But yeah, hanging out with bands. Like if you live in a city where there's a lot of live music, hang out at the venues, start meeting the bands that play there regularly, and just say, hey, you know, I'm looking to get experience and I'll work for you for free if you let me mix, you know. Right. And build a relationship with those guys. If there's a venue where bands that are up and coming are playing that are on tour, you know, see if you can get a job there. And again, like you start building your mixing skills. And I've known people who were the house sound engineer at clubs where bands would play on tour. And it just so happened that, you know, 2 nights ago they fired their sound man, and they come through, this guy does a great job mixing them, they offer them the job, and the next day they're on the road with them. So you really don't know where it's going to come from, but you've got to be around it. Like you've got to get your feet in it somehow.
Yeah, because you're in a different situation where you really can't practice your craft right now. Like,
right.
Your craft is, I need to be in the venue, like with Pro Tools, or, if you're a composition, if songwriting, like I can do that, like this is a kind of a tricky thing. So someone just posted something about the smart webinars that they're doing. So that's a great link. I don't know if they have they probably have a trial version of that software. I'm not sure what that is. So.
I think they do. Oh, another one that comes to mind is Shure does a lot of really great stuff on RF. So RF is like a whole black art. If you can get good with RF, then you will always have a job. So Shure's got a lot of good webinars on RF and wireless.
Why is that a black art?
Well, just because it's changing so much, with the FCC selling off all the frequencies. So it's an ongoing, completely different environment, like where, 15 years ago, we had a block of frequencies that we could use for all of our wireless stuff. And then, the FCC decides they're going to start selling off to, the cellular companies, and all the cellular companies started buying up all these frequencies. So now the amount of frequencies that's available to the entertainment industry has gotten so small. So it's not only like, if your show's out there and you've got 3 guitar players on wireless and then a bunch of 5 people in the band on wireless in ears, that's 8 different frequencies you need, plus all the backups. And then you're competing with the TV station across the road, the radio station down the road. If there's an NFL game going on in the city, it's all those frequencies are competing for the same bandwidth. So being able to basically correlate and find clean frequencies that you can use for your show. And like the bigger shows that have a lot of wireless stuff going on, they'll have someone who specifically just handles wireless. And that's their whole deal, is they set up every day, they scan to find all the clean frequencies that are usable. They program all the wireless to each frequency, and then they just monitor it all day long, because you could do your whole day, everything's clean, and then you do sound check, everything worked great, and then 20 minutes before the show starts, all of a sudden all your frequencies have noise and radio and other stuff coming through them, because there was a TV station across the road that only comes on at 6 o'clock at night. So now they're on your frequencies, and now you got to start all over. It's really like, that stuff is so crazy.
You're like, that's someone else's job, right?
Oh, yeah, I never deal with that. I'm like, I don't even want to get near that.
Yeah. I think Michael just popped up a question. You wanna ask that question, Michael?
Sure. Hey, nice to hear from you. Thanks for being here with us. Also, I saw Fastball in 1999, and you may have been working front of house for them at the time.
I think I was there somewhere around like 98, 97, 98, 99, somewhere. Yeah, great band.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I like their new stuff too. So kind of piggybacking on Molly's question, can you talk a little bit about Sound Girls? I think that's a really interesting organization that I understand you're involved with. And then also, just knowing that there are so many men in this industry, and what would you say is the most important thing for a young man entering the industry to keep in mind about how to make the industry more inclusive and equitable? Or what is something that you think every man in the industry should know and understand about the struggles of women in the business?
Okay, good questions. Well, Sound Girls is an organization that I co-founded with Carrie Kais, the monitor engineer for Pearl Jam. And it came about when I started doing live sound back in the late 80s, Carrie was the only other woman who I'd ever heard about. And we both kind of worked, I was working for Spin Doctors, she was working for Pearl Jam and the Red Hot Chili Peppers, kind of in the same genre, but in 20 some years we had never once crossed paths or met. We knew of each other our whole career, but never had a chance to meet until 2012, I think it was. We were on a panel at AES for women in live sound, and there were 5 women on the panel. We all had been in the business for over 20 years, and none of us had ever met until that panel. And we met, 5 minutes before speaking, and we all kind of just were like, well, how did you get into this? And our stories were so similar of why we do what we do and how we got started. And we really just bonded instantly. And after the panel, we kept in touch, and I had been looking for a way to reach out to young women to show them that these careers are available to them, that you don't have to just, you know, get a traditional career, that, you know, women can do this too. And Carrie had, you know, we'd been talking and she'd commented on how nice it would have been had all of us had that support group of each other throughout our careers, you know, because there are things that women have to deal with that men don't, you know, and it would just be nice to have someone to talk to that would understand. So that's kind of where the idea for Sound Girls was born. It was to just kind of give women who are working in the industry a network of support, and to kind of empower and inspire the next generation of women who want to do these things like music production, recording, producing, engineering, live sound. And the industry, just when we launched, the industry response was overwhelmingly positive, which has been great. And the organization has just been growing exponentially. There's groups all over the world. There are chapters are all over the world. And I think it's over close to 6,000 members, I think, right now, plus the Facebook page is something like 15,000 followers. It's just been great. But as far as what men can do, I think that just, you know, there's, you know, having the being able to support the women in the industry. If you're working with women and you want to support them, just there are some guys out there who, like, I hear horror stories about women who have been sexually harassed or assaulted, completely blindsided. Like, they'll, you know, work at a venue and they work with a touring crew all day long. The crew's been great. And, you know, then all of a sudden after the show, one of the guys will offer to walk the girl out to the car and then, you know, put the moves on her. And she's like, dude, we worked together all day. You're totally cool. Now why are you doing this? Or, you know, even worse situations. So if you work with women, just letting them know that, hey, if you ever are in a situation where you're uncomfortable, because that's the tough part, because it's really difficult for women, especially on tour. You know, if you think about it, if you're a young woman and your dream is to go on tour with a band, whether you're an independent or you work for a company, you get on your first tour and now all of a sudden there's a guy on that crew who is sexually harassing you. What do? Do you tell the higher up, the tour manager, and then have the tour manager think, oh God, well, I'm gonna have to get rid of her because we can't have this out here? Or if you work for a company, do you call your company, and then your company starts to, you know, say, well, you know, maybe we should bring you off the road because, you know, we don't want anything to happen? Or do we call, you know, you're just kind of in between a rock and a hard place. You know, you're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't. So to know that you have someone who has your back is huge. To know that if, you know, hey, this guy was like really making me uncomfortable, and I can come to you and say, hey, can you just maybe like run interference for me, or, you know, just kind of have my back, that would be huge for women. That solves a whole bunch of problems. And also I notice a lot of times when I walk into a venue, immediately the house sound engineer will start talking to one of the guys on the crew about audio. And sometimes, like, people just want to be helpful. You always want to just, you know, if someone asks you a question, you want to have answers. But when it's not your job, it's better to say, well, actually, you want to talk to Michelle. She's the sound engineer, you know, or whoever the woman is on the crew, that it's actually their job. Instead of just talking for them, which you're not, I know you're not doing it, you're doing it unconsciously. You're not thinking like, oh, well, I'm, you know, just going to have the answer. But just by pointing out the fact that, well, actually, you should be talking to Suzanne. That's her job. That is really helpful as well. So those are two ideas. It's tough. It's kind of like we're all, you know, learning as we go here. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That's great practical advice. Thanks.
Anyone else that's, you know, listening want to chime in on what you would think would be helpful? You have some attentive people who would like to be helpful. So Molly, you know, or anyone else, I don't know if anyone else has something else why we're here and listening. This is a great topic to touch on.
Especially from the younger generation. Cause for me, you know, it was kind of like when I started out, I think I had the good resting bitch face down. So I think that's what it's called. So it was like the don't mess with me look, which kind of like kept me from having to deal with a lot of stuff that other women have had to deal with. because I just kind of put it out there, like, just don't mess with me. But
I find that hard to believe. I mean, I have not seen that face on you, so I think that's good then.
Good day.
Yeah.
I have a thought. Sorry. Yeah, no, I experienced the same sort of thing. I work at some venues around here, like they're bigger venues, which is great. But I have the same thing of like, don't mess with me. You know, I wear cargo shorts during the summer, and it's weird to find a balance between, you know, the super macho personality and who you really are. So how do you find that balance between, you know, frankly, being an asshole and being yourself?
Yeah, you know, for me, it's always kind of like will put up with a lot, you know, like a lot of times, you know, when guys are being stupid and making dumb comments, I'll just kind of play stupid, like not get it. So then they give up, you know, but when guys are being, you know, whether it's condescending or patronizing or just like, you know, not even with sexual harassment, but just, you know, trying to tell you how to do your job, I get to a certain point where I'll humor somebody, and then at that point, you know, you push me to a point where it's like, okay, I've had enough. I know how to do my job. I don't need you here. Sometimes it's fun to just let them go and see how big of a hole that they'll dig, you know. But yeah, like I'll, you know, you got to be able to hang with the guys because you're working with them. So I've always looked at it more like it's interesting to. Like, I love learning about people and watching people. So I've always loved being in an environment where I can just kind of observe how other people act and react. And it just teaches you a lot, you know, and there's ways that men, like traits that men have that we could benefit from and vice versa. Like working with lots of guys for years, one thing that guys tend to do is like, if guys get mad at each other, they call each other out on it. Like if somebody does something that makes somebody else mad, they're like, dude, you know, you suck. Why did you do that? You know, you really screwed this up for me. And then it's over. They have a little argument and it's over. But women, we tend to get mad about something and, you know, hold on to it inside and not want to bring it up and not want to cause problems. But then there's this rift between you and your other, you know, your coworker, which just kind of builds and builds, and that's not good. So it's kind of, you know, there's good and bad for both. And so I kind of approach things as like, what can I learn from the other people? And then where is it the point where I need to say something? And like, you know, there's a lot of stuff you can just let go because it's not worth your energy. But when someone does something or says something that's out of line, that's when, you know, you like, okay, this is time for me to step up and say something.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Super tricky and it's not anything unique to, you know, sound. I mean, it's almost every career has that navigating, you know, I need to work with these people, you know, we need to treat each other professionally, but there is definitely, you know, I see very subtle things, you know, a lot of the women that I interact with, the students as far as, you know, 18 to 22, you know, and there's this, can you do this? And there's this hesitation, and, you know, a guy will jump right in like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'll figure, you know, like there's this like, and that hesitation, all of a sudden someone's not on the console now, or an opportunity was lost. And like, they were just thinking of, you know, so it can be really subtle things that happen that are not intentional. It just is, you know, something that constantly trying to navigate. It's tricky for everybody.
Yeah. Well, as women, I think we tend to feel like we have to almost be an expert at something before we even try it.
Definitely.
That's exactly what you're saying. Like guys will be like, yeah, I don't know, but I'll try. And we feel like, well, we're going to get judged if we mess up. So we have to kind of at least have an idea of what we're doing before. And that's a big thing to get over. That's a really hard thing to get over. It's just like, yeah, you may not know anything about it, but dive in and see what you can learn.
Yep. Josie's got a question for you.
Hi again. Kind of backtracking. I'm pretty sure you mentioned that when you go on tour for audio, either the band hires you directly or you do it through a company. Mm-hmm. So how do you go about finding a company that does stuff like that?
Good question. Yeah, like if you want to work for a company, there's like the biggest touring companies in the US are Sound Image, Claire Global, There's Firehouse Productions, Eighth Day, Maryland Sound. Basically, you know, the companies that do all the major tours. You can start there.
Let me pause you for. Is there a reference where all those companies are maybe listed? Because if you just Google sound company, you could get someone who does like a corporate wedding, like, or you know.
There used to be like Polestar. They have a website. They used to come out with these directories every year. I don't know if they have anything on their website, like if you become a member. But I would say like the industry magazines, like a Live Sound International, Front of House Online, any of the like the industry trade magazines that handle touring, because they're always doing profiles on the tours that are out there, and they're always listing. They're using, you know, so-and-so's out with Jackson Brown, or, you know, Jackson Brown is out with Sound Image, or you know, Blink 182 is using Rat Sound. Like, so the industry mags will tell you what companies are doing what tours. So that's a start. But as far as the directory, other than Polestar used to have them, but they also covered like every company in the country. So like large and small. I would start with the industry periodicals, like look Pro Sound Web, Pro Sound News, Live Sound International, and Front of House Online, or Front of House International, I think it is. Those are good places to look. But when you start at a company, you're basically going to start out as, you know, the cable rat. You're the person who's pulling the feeder cable and running the snake and, you know, patching the stage. So it's not a guaranteed thing that you're ever going to mix. So if mixing is your priority, you really have to show the initiative. What happens is on a big tour, a lot of times a support act will come out and they won't have a monitor engineer. So the tour will ask, you know, one of the audio crew, hey, you want to mix monitors for this band for like $50 a night? And that is a great opportunity to get some mixing skills and to make connections with different artists. Because the people that, aside from the companies, it's production managers and tour managers that generally do the hiring of the sound engineers for a tour. So once a band is going to go on tour, usually the first person hired is the tour manager. And then that person is tasked with finding the crew. And if, depending on the level of the band, like a baby band that's just out in a van, you know, their first tour, the tour manager is probably also going to be doing sound or lights. You're usually wearing 2 or 3 hats. Then as the band gets a little bit bigger, you know, then they can split those jobs up. So now the tour manager's tour managing and they hire a sound engineer. And then as you progress to the next level, they hire a production manager. And then production managers are in charge of hiring the crew people. So if you work at a venue, like say there's a venue in your city that all the bands that tour, you know, like a smaller size venue, like theater or a club that touring bands play at, I would get a job there and just start making connections with the tour managers and the production managers that come through, because they're the ones that are actually going to be doing the hiring, aside from sound companies. But sound companies, you know, it's a great way to get a ton of experience. And then there are opportunities. You just really need to show that initiative. Like, hey, if these guys, you know, if anybody on this tour needs a sound engineer, I'm happy to do it. You know, if a band comes out, a support act needs someone to mix, I'll do it, you know, and that gives you experience and also get your name out there.
Right, because that's how you got to have to practice is running it. And then I know you've kind of really made a distinction in your life between monitor and front of house. And we had talked about that before. You were getting monitor calls and you're like, I want to stay for, you know, like I thought that was really, I mean, that's kind of a stand you have to take.
Well, it's, you know, and some people it's, you know, for me, it's not necessarily what works for everybody else, because it was a point where when I first started out, you know, I had a lot of experience mixing front of house. And then I had also noticed that people who had done both jobs, because there's always more jobs for monitor engineers, like they're always in need. And if you're even, you know, moderately good, you'll always be working. And where I would finish a tour and get a call to do monitors, the other thing I would notice is that the people who went to the monitor end of the snake had a hard time getting out of there. So if you start doing monitors and you're pretty good at it, you have a really hard time getting the front of house gigs again, because people are always calling you to do monitors. So you're always getting offers. So I kind of, you know, sacrificed work for periods of time because I wanted to stay at front of house. I wanted to just do that and be really good at that, and instead of just being able to do. But for other people, you know, it's, some people just want to work and they like being able to do both, and they'll just take whichever job they can, which is great. You know, like for me, where I wanted to be, that didn't work for me, because I knew once I'd start doing monitors, I would be stuck there. And I have a friend who, he started doing monitors, and probably, you know, for 15 years, that's the only jobs he could get was doing monitors. Like, and he finally said, I'm not taking another gig until it's a front of house gig. And he was off work for about 9 months until he finally got, you know, people were like, okay, we'll stop calling you for monitors and we'll find a front of house tour for you. So yeah, so it just depends on what you're looking for.
Yeah. Go ahead, Molly.
Hi again. So how do you build relationships with touring crew? Like you were saying, like working as a stagehand or as an engineer, how do you do that without interfering with their work? Like, when do you build that connection?
Yeah, it's just, you know, like if you're a stagehand, you know, whoever you're working with through the day, obviously you want to get the job done first, but, you know, just chit chat, you know, you'll find people who you kind of click with, and you're just, you know, having little conversations throughout the day. And at the end of the day, you know, just give them your info. Say, hey, it was great working with you, and I'd like to go on the road, and you know, can I give you my info and stay in touch? It's as simple as that. Or if, you know, once you're done what you need to do, and if you want to do front of house, just go to the front of house engineer and introduce yourself and say, would you mind if I just kind of shadow you and pick your brain a little bit? And most people are pretty open to that. So just, you know, let them know, like, I'm interested in doing this and I'd love to ask you some questions if you've got time. And it's, you know, the worst they can say is no, don't bother me. So nothing gained, nothing lost. And if you're, yeah, so if you're working on the same thing, if you're working in a venue and you're the tech for the day, just, you know, talk to the people who are coming through and just say, oh yeah, I'd really love to get on the road. I'd love to pick your brain and find out how you got your first tour, you know, and just start conversations.
Cool.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because obviously you're walking into a venue, you're working front of house, and Molly might be there like, well, when's the right time to approach you? You know,
Yeah.
is it a quick introduction and then let me go about my job and then maybe come back later? Is that?
Well, it's, you know, if you're working on the crew at the venue, obviously you need to do whatever you've been asked to do first, but then you'll have a period of time where you're like, okay, well, you know, everybody's kind of at that, the tour reaches a point where it's like all the touring personnel are done with the stagehands. Like we're kind of on autopilot at this point where we're just doing what we need to do. So if you're working as a stagehand and you're getting cut, you might like be like, okay, you guys don't, you know, you're cut and don't come back till show call. Take a couple minutes and just walk up to somebody on the crew that you were working with or that you want to talk to and just say, hey, I'm working as one of the hands today, but I'd love to pick your brain for a few minutes if you have time. And they'll tell you, you know, it's like, oh, well, yeah, I'll talk to you, but now's not a good time. Or if you come back here, you know, at this time, you know, most people will be happy to. And if it's not a good time, they'll tell you when will be. So obviously don't, you know, if your job is to bolt the truss together, don't stop doing that to go talk to somebody, you know, do what you're asked to do. And then when you have a break, take advantage of that time. And if you see somebody's like, you know, really deep in concentration or focusing on something, obviously it's not a good time, but, you know, just hang around for a little bit, or, you know, ask them when would be a good time, or can I at least get your contact info to email you some questions?
That's a great idea. Yeah, I think that's a tricky balance of someone's working and how do I don't want to interrupt them, but I do want to make that relationship. So I think that's a really good question, Mom.
Yeah, I've been in situations where, you know, we'll be working throughout the day and there'll be a couple of women on the crew and, you know, I'm doing my thing, but then after the crew's all cut, the steward, like who's in charge of the crew will come up and say, oh yeah, we had one of our girls here, you know, she was wondering if she could get your info. I'm like, well, she should have came and talked to me. Like, you know, they're too afraid to just come up and say anything, you know? And I'm like, I'm always open to talk to anybody. You know, if I'm busy, I'll be like, just come back in an hour or whatever. But, you know, I'm always happy to talk to people, so.
Great. I think we have time for a couple more questions. Sven's got a question. You have a microphone. Sven, are you there? Where? I don't see you.
Hello.
There you are. We hear you.
Perfect. Thank you. So thanks for the insight into the side of your audio business. And I'm a studio engineer, and I'm looking into doing live sound on a regular basis. The most daunting thing to me is all the different consoles. Do you have any tips on how to work on, like, efficiently on so many different systems?
Yes, the biggest thing is learning signal flow. Learn proper signal flow through the audio console, because once you know, you start with the gain with your preamp, your head amp, and then that next thing is the EQ section. When you know the signal path through the console, it's the same on every board. You have a little bit more flexibility with things like, okay, well, I'm going to add an insert point pre or post EQ on this console, but I can't do that on this console. But learn the signal path from, the preamp to the output. And then when you walk up to a console that you haven't used before, all you got to do is know, okay, first thing I need is my gain. Where is that? Okay, that's here. Then next thing I need is my EQ. That next thing I need is my bus section. And then, at least you know the order of things that you're looking for. As far as learning the patching and the menus, it's tough because every platform has a completely different way of working. So in my case, if I know I'm going to be working on a console that I haven't used before, like what I do is when I have a show coming up, and if I'm not carrying equipment, like if I'm using all local gear, I will find out what console I'm going to be working on prior to that show, like at least a week before. And if it's say, okay, I've got the new, I've got the Ravage and I've never used that before, I'll get the manual and I'll go through and find out, okay, how do I patch? How do I do my patch on this? How do I assign effects? How do I assign auxes? Just, the main things that you need to do. And just kind of, even if I have to like make a little cheat sheet of reminders of like, this is how I do that. But you can find manuals and tutorials from pretty much everything online. But the other thing is too, if you're walking into a situation where you're mixing a band and it's not your gear, there's going to be someone there whose gear it is, who is responsible for it. And basically they can walk you through okay, well, you give them an input list. Here's my patch. Can you patch this for me? Like I've done that. I walked into shows, like when I do a lot of international stuff and we walk in and it's, here's your, whatever the console is. And I'll flat out say, look, I know how to mix on this, but I don't know the menu. So here's my patch. I need you to patch this. And I need you to set me up with, these effects. And so that's basically the system tech or the front of house tech. That's their job, is to guide you through that console. But again, like if you can find out ahead of time what it is, just, go through the manual to just familiarize yourself with it prior to getting there. But there always should be someone who is there that's responsible for it, who can show you, hey, how do I assign, DCAs on this? And they can show you that kind of thing.
Yeah, good question. I think we have time for two more. So Christina's got a question, and then Drew will finish it off. Christina, do you want to ask your question?
Sure, yeah. Hi, thank you for doing this. I'm just wondering, in my experience, there's always kind of an order of operations as to what needs to be done before you can even go ahead and do the next thing. So I'm wondering if you have a method kind of of approaching front of house mixing.
Sure. Yeah, what we start with is loading in, so we load in, and on a bigger tour, it's, it starts with lighting, then video, then audio, and then the backline, all the band instruments. So when we're loading in, I'm at front of house getting all of my equipment and setting it up while the PA is getting put up. Once I'm set up and once the PA is up, then we noise the system. We basically run pink noise to make sure all the components are working. And then my system tech will time align like subs and front fills and the main hangs if there's side hangs. At that point, he might do a little bit of a house EQ, or they just hand it over to me, and then I will play my selected tracks through the PA, walk around the room, listen to it, make any EQ adjustments I need for the PA. And at that point, while all that's happening, is the band techs are setting up all the instruments on stage, and the monitor engineer is setting up the monitor console and all their stuff. And once the instruments are all set, then the next step is to mic everything. So we get all the mics up, and after that, once everybody's ready, we do a line check. So basically, what line check consists of is the monitor engineer and myself will run through all of the inputs on stage with the backline tech. So usually we start with drums, and the drummer will just play, you know, starting with the kick, then the snare, then each individual tom and cymbals. And during that time, we're setting our gain, doing rough EQ, setting any dynamics, just getting things somewhat dialed in. And also making sure that everything is patched where it's supposed to be patched. Sometimes things get mispatched. Sometimes you have an air gap, something's not working. That's where you kind of troubleshoot anything that's not working right. You go through every instrument on stage and all the vocals. And then after that, we just kind of wait for sound check. So then the band comes in to do their sound check, and that's where you just kind of dial things in, really tweak everything, and, you know, kind of have your mix ready for the start of the show. And then after that, you know, you're just waiting for show. It's always a good idea. We do another line check about 15 to 20 minutes before the show starts, over headphones though, just to make sure that nothing happened between, you know, that downtime. I mean, you never know, someone walks across the stage and kicks a cable and unplugged, you know, something gets unplugged, or something got, you know, a microphone died. So it's always a good idea to do another line check just before the band goes on stage, because you don't want to have to spend the first song fixing something, you know, and then after the show, it's loadout. So we just basically tear everything down and pack it up as fast as possible.
What do you mean by air gap? Exactly.
Basically a cable that's not plugged in. So you have the connector and the cable, and there's air in between because they're not plugged in.
Right. Thank you so much.
That's, so yeah, Drew will bring us into our last question. So Drew.
Thank you. So I'm personally very, very new to this sort of industry. It seems like something that I wanted to get interested in, and just like recently this year, I tried to join my school's like theater program, try to get used to like using microphones and things like that. But with the like coronavirus thing, I can't really do that. So I'm trying to figure out a way to get into this like industry and like figure out what I need to find out first without kind of getting like poorly informed. So I just didn't know if you had any like websites or anything like that you would very personally like recommend, or is my best option just kind of like Google like terms to know for sound engineering?
Yeah, I mean, like, well, the big things are signal flow, like I mentioned earlier, and learn how to do proper gain structure, which are, you know, two of the fundamentals of everything we do, whether it's live or studio. There's also a great book. It's the Yamaha Sound Reinforcement Handbook, which is a really fantastic reference book. It's really easy to read, and it covers a lot of the theory and the terminology in sound reinforcement. Talks about different microphone polar patterns, talks about how to figure out if you have enough power for your system. I mean, it just kind of covers everything. But if you want to learn about different types of microphones, you could visit the major manufacturers' websites, and just start, you know, searching through there. A lot of them will have, you can search by the microphone type, or if you need like a vocal microphone or drum microphones, looking at specs and understanding like frequency response of microphones and what different mics, you know, work well for different instruments and vocals. Shure, AKG, Audio-Technica, Sennheiser, you know, they're all the major manufacturers. Same thing with consoles, you know, just kind of get an idea of all the different types of consoles out there. And, you know, PA systems, there's so many different PAs, and unless you're working for a company where your job is to be the tech for that PA, it's, you know, it's nice to know them, but it's one of those things like you'll learn them as you use them. Like you'll learn when you use a Meyer PA, it kind of has this sound to it. If you use JBL, it kind of has this sound to it. So it's not the kind of thing that you need to know all the different ones, because you really, when you first start out, you don't have a choice. You're going to be using what you get. So you'll learn as you work what you like and what you don't like. So I wouldn't say you have to go out and learn what amplifiers and what PAs and all that kind of stuff, but learn microphones, because those are the kind of things that you will actually be able to choose and say, oh, I like this microphone for vocals. I like this for the kick drum. I like this for hi-hat, you know, things like that.
You're not going to plug your class?
Oh yeah, if you want me to. I have an online video course for live sound, which teaches its basic intro to live sound and mixing. It's called Mixing Music Live, and it does kind of cover all that stuff, the basics of, if you just want to get out there and start doing it, it kind of gives you, what you need to know. And right now I'm offering it at 50% off. It's $148.50. And you can find it at mixingmusiclive.com.
And then she sends out an email pretty regularly too. So even if you just sign up for that,
you can sign up for the email list. There's a lot of info on the email list as well. And there's a free ebook on there too, which it's 7 things every live sound engineer should know, which kind of covers that stuff.
Yeah, I think that's because there's not a lot of, it is a tough thing to practice if you're not in a venue, At Capitol, we have a small room with a small PA where we can practice on the M32, but that's pretty rare, to have that kind of, it's a tough thing. So yeah, learning the vocabulary, learning the different mics, and then, starting at a small local levels as how it works.
Yeah.
Awesome.
There's also another, there's a great book. It's called Girl on the Road by Claire Corey on Amazon. And it's only a couple dollars, but she's a guitar tech. She's also a tour manager, and she's been touring for about 20 years. She's been all over the world and all kinds of venues and sizes of events. And she really breaks it down. It's more from like a guitar tech standpoint, but for anybody who wants to get on tour, she really gives you a step-by-step of here's how you do it. It's the most practical advice I've ever seen and it's really well thought out and thorough. For how to get your start, and I highly recommend it. You can find it on Amazon. It's called Girl on the Road. So and it's an easy read. Like you can probably read it in a couple hours. It's a good book. Perfect.
Well, thank you, Michelle. So generous. My clock says an hour and 17, so that was fast. Thank you, everyone, for coming in. And we recorded this, so when this goes online, I'll make sure it's available so people can come back to it. So thank you so much for taking time.
You're welcome. Thanks everybody for showing up. Good luck.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, buddy. Everybody, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday.
All right, you too.
All right. Bye, all.
Bye.
Bye.